Good morning. Happy 4th of July coming up. I hope you have a happy 4th of July weekend and enjoy the celebrations. And, glad that we are here this morning and we're able to worship the Lord in this country. On July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress voted to dissolve their connection with Great Britain, declaring the 13 colonies an independent republic. 2 days later, on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was formally adopted and published, which is why we celebrate that date today. The second line of that document is perhaps one of the most famous lines in American history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A new beginning for a new country. We're grateful today for the opportunity to worship God in this country. We're grateful today for the freedoms our country affords us. And I'm grateful today for the new beginnings that this celebration represents. And this morning, I want to look at another new beginning. This one was perhaps a little less auspicious than the celebration of July 4th. It's certainly less well publicized at the time. In a small town a few miles north of Nazareth, we find a wedding celebration that marks the first public ministry of Jesus. So we turn this morning to John 2, verses 1 through 11. John 2, verses 1 through 11. You'll remember that we were talking about Jesus' encounters with people in the book of John and the various places that he meets people and the various encounters that they have and what those encounters mean. And this morning we talk about the wedding feast. John 2, verse 1. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with us? My hour is not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." So they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now and take it to the head waiter." So they took it to him. When the head waiter tasted the water, which had become wine, and did not know where it had come from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom and said to him, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then he serves the poorer wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of his signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. John 2 begins the public ministry of Jesus. This is his first kind of public act, his first stepping forward. Now, of course, we've already seen in John 1 that Jesus has been out and about. It's not that he was cloistered up in a hole, but that this is the beginning of his ministry, his actual ministry, his contact with people with a purpose. The location is Cana of Galilee. It's 10 miles north of Nazareth, we think. It's within walking distance, but it's not particularly close. You'll remember when we talked about Nazareth, it's a small town. Cana is probably smaller, which is one of the reasons we don't have great evidence of where it's at. So Jesus has gone to an even smaller town to begin his ministry. In the wedding context, weddings are a great time of joyous celebration. This is true for Jewish weddings as well. It was emphasized that they would have a joyous occasion, a joyous celebration, family gathered, friends gathered. And back then, in the first century, wedding celebrations typically lasted 7 days if they could manage it. 7 days of partying. Now, today, I don't know if you know this, I checked out some numbers this week. It's very expensive to even attend a wedding. The average cost of attendance according to The Knot, which is one of those marriage websites that's very popular, for a tender is $888. $888. Now maybe you're thinking, I don't spend that much to attend. If it's local, probably not. But if you are going out of town, you are paying for travel, for hotel accommodations, possibly for clothes, a gift for the family, for the new couple. It's expensive. Could you imagine if we did that for 7 days? Kind of glad we don't. Weddings are one of those times that we gather together for joyous celebration. So the same thing is happening here in John's passage. Their weddings are ordained by God in Genesis 2:24, and they are a celebration of life. The invitation for this wedding is extended to Jesus and his disciples and his mother, which probably indicates that they were close to the family that was being the couple that was being married. Now, in the middle of their great joyous celebration, the worst thing in the world happens. They run out of wine. This is a fairly serious problem in the first century, to run out of wine. Wine symbolized the joy and celebration of the event. So if you wanted a joyous and a celebratorious event, you would have plenty of wine to go around. You were celebrating. You were having a great time. That it runs out is a serious embarrassment. And it's particularly an embarrassment for the groom. Now, here's the thing. We all have problems that we run into daily, right? So the groom runs out of wine, seriously embarrassed. Perry Noble has a great quote. Every miracle in the Bible begins with a problem. So if you have a problem, you are a candidate for a miracle. Don't give up. Every miracle in the Bible begins with a problem. This miracle that Jesus does begins with a problem. The joyous celebration, the wine has run out. So, of course, they look for a solution. Now, Mary turns to Jesus and says, they have no wine. Is this just sad news? Is this just is this expectation that Jesus will perform something? It seems that probably she has some expectation that he will be able to fix the problem. If you look at verse 5, his mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. As in, I think Jesus can fix this problem, you just have to do what he says. Now, she probably wasn't looking for a miraculous intervention. Jesus hasn't done anything yet that might indicate that. But she probably knows that Jesus is resourceful. We never see Joseph in the gospel stories. It's likely that he has died by this point in time. Jesus is probably the one who provides for the family. He's probably already provided for Mary at various points. And his resourcefulness is probably at the top of her list. She knows that he is able to make things happen. Jesus' response to her in verse 4 is quite interesting. Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come. Now, woman is courteous, if not necessarily rude. It's maybe a bit formal, but it's not a put down. He is not saying, woman, be quiet. He is saying, mother, woman, you are a woman, and I acknowledge that you have a thing that you are bringing to me. It's perhaps formal, but not rude. However, the second part of the response is maybe a little bit more of a rebuke. What does that have to do with us? And in Greek, you can have a question and have expected responses. So you can expect a yes, you can expect a no, you can expect some conditional response. He expects the answer to be nothing. What does this have to do with us? Nothing. Really, it would be more like if today, how we might phrase this is you would say, we have no wine. And you would say, so what? So what? That doesn't matter to me. Nothing. And he gives the reason, my hour has not yet come. My hour has not yet come. Jesus' hour at this point seems to be the beginning of his public ministry. And here's the interesting thing about his public ministry. Jesus' public ministry is not dictated by human need. It's not pushed by human agenda or manipulation or advice. Jesus' ministry begins when the Father says it begins. Jesus' ministry begins when it is needed by the Father, not by the people around him. No one can put Jesus in a box and make him perform. Not even his own mother. We need to remember this as we think about how Jesus sometimes, we turn to him to solve our problems, but we expect him sometimes to do acts that he is not prepared to do. We cannot make him perform for us. In parenting, what if you had to do everything that your kids told you to do? Would that make you a great parent or a terrible parent? Well, if you're kids, they probably think you're the best parent ever. But when they're 30 years down the road, you'd be like, man, you guys were the worst. If you did everything that your kids made you do, you would not be a very good parent. Jesus' ministry is very much the same. He is not dependent on us telling him what to do. Jesus begins his ministry on his time, not on ours. Now, the transformation of the water to the wine, there's not much said about it. There's a few context clues that I want us to look in on, and then we're going to talk about the significance of it. In verse 6 through 11, we see verse 6. Now there were 6 stone water pots set for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. These are huge barrels. They're huge crates. I mean, they're carrying 20 or 30 gallons of water. They're quite large. They're used, as it says here, for Jewish purification rites. It's a ceremonial ritual. This sets up part of what Jesus' miracle means, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it is a key detail. John is very sparse with details, and sometimes when he puts one in, we need to pay attention to what he puts in. So when he says there are Jewish ceremonial pots, you need to put that in our brains and tag it. Jewish ceremonial pots for purification purposes. Because he's not going to give us many other clues about what this ceremony means. The water pots are filled to the top. There's to be no additional contents, right? There's no mistake that it is water all the way up to the top, 100% water. The pots contain nothing but water in the miracle. This is likely the point after this. The servants draw the water and they take it to the head waiter. This is likely the point, although we are not told, where the water is turned to wine. By the time the water gets to the head waiter, it is wine. It is not clear what the miracle is. Does Jesus create the wine? Does he transform the water into wine? How? And I mean, how? Right? So this is a miraculous event. It cannot be repeated by us. One poet put it quite nicely when he says on the how. The conscious water met its master and blushed. The conscious water met its master and blushed. That is, the water did what the master asked it. In either case, Jesus has done something quite special. Water does not just turn into wine by itself. I think today, if Jesus decided, instead of a wedding in Cana, and he decided to celebrate the 4th of July, this is my thought of what he would do. He would turn sparklers into fireworks, right? The little hand sparklers into gigantic fireworks. He would turn those little snap pops, there we go, that you throw, those little snap pops into cannon blasts. That would be cool. That's the kind of transformation that is happening here. It's something water into something greater. That's the point of this illustration, the point of this miracle, something normal into something superior. The new wine is meant to be understood as an increase in quality. The tradition and the emphasis here is on Jesus' miraculous ability to not just create wine. He doesn't just create wine. He creates the best wine. The quality is emphasized. This is intentional. The quality is emphasized. The poor wine was usually reserved for when guests would not notice. You know, they'd be drinking, and then a little while later, they would not notice that the wine has gotten worse because they've already had plenty to drink. Jesus provides something that's superior to their expectations. I think we all understand this miracle proper, right? We understand Jesus is able to transform water into wine. Jesus has made something plain, water, into something different, wine. But it's harder to figure out what is the significance of this transformation. What does Jesus intend for us to understand about him and his ministry because he does this? What does it mean? And what does it mean for us today? Even if I understand what it meant then, what does it mean for us today? Thankfully, the texts give us a few clues as to what we should do with this miracle and how we can apply it. First, I think the text indicates that this is a celebration of life and new beginning. Jesus is initiating a new beginning. Just as the marriage celebration around him is a new beginning, this miracle is the introduction of his ministry. It is a new beginning. And in particular, it is an indication of the change of the water to the wine, the transformation of Judaism to Christianity. Jesus replaces the old, the water, with something new, the wine. The Jewish wedding is the setting. The Jewish customs are the setting. The Jewish rites of purification are the setting. And here's the thing. In this story, they all come up short. There is a lack in these rites. There is a lack in the custom. There is a lack in the celebration. And so Jesus steps in and he begins to fill that lack. The water of Christlessness is transformed into the wine of richness and fullness of life. And one of the interesting things that we mentioned at the beginning, the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is a principle that is found because of the Bible. The water of the law is turned into the wine of the gospel, or grace. So one of the things that we are to understand is that we are meant to celebrate the fullness of life that we find in Christ. And Jesus is a complete celebration of life to the fullest. And are we living that life out right now? And if not, what can we do to allow Jesus to change that in us? What needs to be transformed in your life that is deficient in order to make it full? Celebrate grace, freedom, and life that Jesus gives us. That's my first main application. Celebrate the life and new beginning that Jesus brings. Second, I think it's very clear that in this story and in our lives, we should turn to Jesus when we're in trouble, right? We should turn to Jesus when we're in trouble. Like Mary, we can turn to Jesus in our hour of need. The Creator dwelt among us. He understood our problems and our difficulties and our lives. He means for us to call upon him when we are in need of help. We are called to recognize him and his work in our life. And we're to understand Jesus is completely able to help us. Water to wine is impossible unless you're Jesus. Right? Water all the way to the top. There's no deception. But by the power that he has over creation, he is able to transform this water. This is a power only held by God. The quality of the wine speaks to Jesus' own superior nature, his own superior ability to meet and exceed our needs. So turn to Jesus in our need. That's my second application. And then third, I think this is maybe kind of a more general one, but seek the significance of what Jesus has done. Seek the significance of what Jesus has done. Signs, Jesus does signs in the book of John. And these signs are meant to point to the glory of Jesus, particularly as they're revealed at the cross, the resurrection, and the exaltation. Everything that Jesus does up until that point points forward. Signs point somewhere. A sign points to the end goal. As D.A. Carson writes, Jesus' miracles are never simply naked powers of display, but signs, significant displays of power that point beyond themselves to the deeper realities that could be perceived with the eyes of faith. That is, Jesus doesn't just do miracles just to do them. He doesn't just do miracles just to prove that he can do miracles, but to point to something, to point that he is in fact the Messiah, to point to the fact that he is in fact the Son of God. How does Jesus reveal himself to us? We need to keep looking at how he meets and exceeds and fulfills the expectations of the Messiah. To the extent that changing water to wine proves that he is the Messiah, his disciples end up believing him. Look in verse 11. The beginning of his signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Like the disciples, we are meant to believe in Jesus, not just because of the signs, but because we understand what they point to, that he is the Messiah, the Son of God. What does Jesus need to demonstrate to you? What do you need to see? What do you need to believe in order to follow him? New beginnings. Like the 4th of July is a new beginning for our country. New beginnings for us. It is quite natural that Jesus would begin his public ministry at a wedding, a time of celebration, a time of great joy, a time of people gathering together, a time of new beginnings. And I think many of us appreciate the setting, and this miracle in particular has become a part of our everyday speech. Water to wine is a phrase that you can use almost anywhere. But I hope that today we walk away understanding that the sign is important because it points us to something. The sign invites us to understand the significance of what Jesus has done on a deeper level, to reflect and consider more deeply the wonders of Jesus' glory. So yes, we are to first celebrate the life and new beginning that Jesus gives us. And yes, we are to turn to Jesus in our time of need. But perhaps most importantly, we're to understand that Jesus' signs are there for us so that we would believe in him, that we would look to him in our time of need, but that we would understand he is the Son of God. To reflect and consider on him, to reflect and consider more deeply the wonders of Jesus' glory. I hope this morning it also invites us to believe in Jesus by looking at him in the midst of the display of his glory. Let us be grateful for our new beginnings and great celebrations that Jesus brings this week, especially when we celebrate the birth of our nation. Thank you.